And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the Monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is one of my good brothers and one of my good sisters here in the temple. In the red corner, we have the resident catfolk enthusiast. And probably is going to be bugging both Zan and myself about playing a Mikote in FF Legend. Good sister, spoiler.
No. I would never force Mikote on someone else.
Phrasing.
I know what I said.
And on the other hand, we have the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Gao Gaigar work continues, for my work is never done.
And by the way, I just remembered that there's something even worse and something even crazier that could be made into a model but I feel bad for the engineers. Not Genesic, but what came after Genesic.
Final Gao Gaigar with the Goldian finger?
Yep. Just saying. But we are not here to cover that. We are here because it is the grand finale of the most ambitious project that we've done yet in the history of GeekWatch. We started it once, restarted it, and now we are at the finish line. And it will be so ironic if we end up having the fact that we have a definitive ending while the company responsible for the project is jumping from one hell to another.
They might have a definitive ending, but not in the same way.
And
yeah, it's a little sad though that that's what's happening to RWBY, even though I'm not a fan of the show anymore.
And at this point, I'm more of a fan of what we've created than what they've created, because, well, you can make a drinking game out of the number of times I've called out Miles Luna and Carrie Shawcross.
Indeed, you can.
But I do not believe my reasoning for doing so is unfounded.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things I will continue to bring up because, well, between this and what happened with season 2 of Genlock, which we will not be reconstructing ever.
No, thank you.
Not interested.
I honestly think some of the people in Rooster Teeth could use a bit of writing class, or actually, you know what? I slightly take that back because I think a lot of the better writers were hogged up by Red vs. Blue.
And even then, Red vs. Blue has gone down in terribly in quality.
I'm saying the stuff before the last couple series. With Zero being the nadir. I'm not even sure why it was called Zero, because whenever you hear Zero as a subtitle for something, you usually think it's supposed to be a side story or a prequel.
Was that the one that they did where it was the first season but actually animated, or am I remembering?
That was an actual side project.
Okay.
No, 0 was the stuff they did after the the ending that they did that involved a whole lot of weird stuff that went way too far on the other end. But no, that's not what that's not what we're covering. We are doing the fourth and final arc, volumes 10 through 12 of our reconstruction of RWBY.
Mm-hmm.
And as you all can see on the screen, this is meant to be our cover of a Vacuo arc. Now, it could be argued that with each of the realm hops that we've done up until this point, with each arc focusing on a different region of Remnant, that we are ripping off Avatar in some form. Except, can that really be stated when the show is when the show's setting itself relies so much on a rule of 4?
Mm-hmm.
That's always been my mindset on that matter. And I wouldn't be surprised if Montiome was taking a few cues from Avatar during the initial design.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, he took inspiration from a lot of different things for RWBY, so.
Mm-hmm.
And just a lot of different things before he even did Haloid.
Yep.
I mean, in some of his earliest stuff, there's elements of John Woo, elements of Street Fighter, elements of Tarantino like crime fiction. A blatant John Woo tribute that was done as part of a video contest for Stranglehold, which Stranglehold isn't a good game, but I still keep it around because it is a interesting game at the very least. Then again, I also keep around Wet, so what the hell do I know?
Mm-hmm.
Although truth be told, I want somebody to take the character design of RWBY from Wet and put their own spin on it. Hell, if I'm bored enough, I might do it. But this last arc is going to be tricky for 2 reasons. One of them is we are in completely blind ass territory here with Vacuo, because the closest thing that we have in canon with Vacuo is, I think, some of the shorts from the Tales of Remnant series, and some of the and a few mentions here and there. Point is, there's not a whole lot to the place, and I consider that a consequence of not writing a series Bible.
Whereas we wrote one as we made more ideas.
Yeah, the total page count for the document we ended up making for this project, which I don't foresee us doing this kind of thing for future reconstructions, is 22 pages long.
Mine, some of that was like repeat information just as we reorganized, but yeah, it's a hefty pitch.
Even if we were to cut some of that down, this wouldn't go lower than 15 pages.
Oh yeah.
Which is why we can say it was a series Bible, because we spent a good chunk of the early phases of this project just trying to nail down the way the world of Remnant works.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what makes this a special case, because normally when we do reconstructions, we just tweak a few things and go from there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of holes in the initial design, not helped by Carrie and Shawcross.
Which,
Miles and Carrie.
To be somewhat charitable, that would probably land in Monty's corner of responsibility because he was the one who had the initial concept, but it should have been developed later on if they didn't have something solid.
Given the rock star attitude that was going on in Rooster Teeth at the time, I think that's the reason why it didn't happen.
Go on.
I think I've been in some of those coastal area design spaces, and there's a very lackadaisical attitude in a lot of those places. Almost, but not quite like a fraternity. Especially since in a lot of places you've got animators, designers, and the like who are just out of college. I don't have any proof of the matter, but given everything that we know about Rooster Teeth, especially in the last few years with some of the spot of bothers that have happened.
That's a term to use, sure.
I think it fits.
Now, wouldn't be surprised.
When we left, now, Zan, would you mind being the evangelist and do a bit of a summary of where we left off, since it's been a couple of months.
Of course. So previously, we had our teams all up in Atlas. They had finally struck down this grim dreadnought that was sent to, well, bring ruin and devastation. With the little help from one of the spirits, specifically the Relic of Creation.
Mm-hmm.
Created some lenses to, some one-time use lenses to give RWBY's Silver Eyes a supersized super boost. And because of their investigation of this now defunct dreadnought, Ozma and everyone else discovered that, well, this dreadnought came from Vacuo. And it's horrifying because of the fact that they found the body of Theo there, which Oz, of course, determines, wow, he's been dead for a while, so I'm guessing Salem has power up there. This takes our crew and points them in the only direction left, towards Vacuo, a desertified semi-wasteland with massive sandstorms and a nomadic people, as was last known.
Mm-hmm.
And so, additional to that, we actually saw that Salem is occupying a space of power in Vacuo, as we had our little end stinger zoom out from the throne room to the primary city. Our Agra Baghdad, as we were calling it in calls.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where everything left off, as they all begin to prepare for a trip to Vacuo to face Salem, to face Team Cunt, and beat them down once and for all.
Mm-hmm. And this is as good a time as any to go into what we have planned with Vacuo, because on most of the material that I was able to pull regarding Vacuo, I mainly pulled from the wiki. And compared to the other nations, what we know about Vacuo is, as far as canon, is sparse. It is known that it is largely a desert. There is a very might makes right attitude in some places. I think there were a few nods to some sort of cat people. I'm not pandering to you with that spoiler.
Oh my goodness. Uh-huh.
Look, you called yourself the Catboy connoisseur. This is what you get.
I never called myself that. It was Theo.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Does this mean that if you go to the swimming pool after church, you're a holy diver?
Yes. Yes. I'll have you know, I like one cat boy. One.
Is it the same Catboy everybody else likes?
Unfortunately, yes.
That proves nothing.
Would you prefer I use the tank the floor jokes again?
If you wish.
You know, I think we could make a third joke here, Monk. She's just a really tall potato.
I am going to break your kneecaps.
If you can reach him.
If I can't, I'll get a step stool.
Down
It's
here,
okay.
salt is a way of life.
It's okay. I just have to lift you and put you over my shoulder. Then you really can't reach my kneecaps.
But well, we are doing our civic duty of bullying the potato. So getting back on the rails. Given the theme of so many characters, concepts, places, and so on, being inspired by fairy tales, folk tales, and regional legends, that led me to the conclusion that Vacuo was going to be our ancient desert, our Baghdad, your Baghdad, your Arabian Nights, your RWBY, whichever you prefer.
People are going to say, but Baghdad isn't legendary. It exists. There are a lot of regional legends in that area of the world, people. That's what we're trying to point at.
Yeah. If I want to throw in Constantinople, then that can be used as well, but not Istanbul.
Oh man, you just pissed off an entire century's worth of Turks right there.
Tell them to get to the back of the line.
Oh, I know.
But the point is that fertile the legends of that sort of Fertile Crescent area is how I would, if I were to have someone draw out our version of Vacuo, that is what I tell them to use as a base. And for that matter, I probably also playing through stuff like the first Assassin's Creed and playing through the Prince of Persia trilogy is stuff I would recommend to that particular artist. And not just rewatching Aladdin, but also rewatching The Thief and the Cobbler.
Or reading 1001 Arabian Nights.
Although I'd have to tell them to exercise caution with watching The Thief and the Cobbler, not because it's a bad movie, but because Thief and the Cobbler has a history.
Indeed.
But getting back to the story, we'd open with volume 10 in this, and this would be less than a few days after the thwarting of the Dreadnought. Oh. And one of the main things that's learned is even there have been in that interim there's been attempts to try and contact the Vacuo Academy, but there's been nothing. And normally this isn't too outside the realm of possibility, because Vacuo does have violent sandstorms on occasion, which does fuck with communications. So it's understood that every now and again there's a communications blackout between Vacuo and the rest of Remnant.
Mm-hmm.
But those communications blackout usually lasts for a few days, maybe a week at most. Not
years.
Not years. And as far as why nobody would be asking why there's been no communication for that amount of time, I would argue that Vacuo is a bit more isolationist than the other nations.
Yeah, they're very insular.
Mm-hmm. And because of that, nobody has seen fit to poke that particular bear.
After all, they learned in school that poking bears isn't dangerous for your health.
It's almost as dangerous as letting bears smell human food.
And almost as dangerous as making fun of your short friends.
Mm-hmm.
But and of course, Ozpin was a bit suspicious because there was no representative from Vacuo at the Vital Festival.
Right.
And that and the dreadnought coming from the direction of Vacuo is giving enough reason to trek to that area.
Mm-hmm.
But what's also made clear about this place is outside of the city states, just going through the desert is very, very dangerous. There are dangerous forms of natural wildlife, just as there are in any desert. There's the danger of being in a fucking desert. Not to mention
the sandstorms.
Not to mention the sandstorms, and oh yeah, desert-themed Grim.
By desert-themed, we mean giant scorpions.
For
those of you who are arachnophobic, this is for you.
Giant scorpions, maybe some sandworms if I feel like going that far.
If you feel like making an ecology that is completely cursed.
Well, isn't that just Australia?
Well,
Australia with extra steps.
If we're gonna go with this idea that going to Vacuo is something that shouldn't be taken lightly, then yeah, you need to have those kind of things.
Indeed.
Much in the same reason that as much as the meme has been used, one does not simply walk into Mordor.
Not to mention that meme has been used incorrectly. When Boromir is making that hand sign, he's talking about the Eye of Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
The ever-watchful eye.
Yeah.
But that's just me being pedantic.
Yeah, but even putting that aside, he makes clear that the eye is the least of your problems in that place.
Yep. Mordor has a lot of bad shit, and so does our Vacuo.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of Volume 10 would be downtime in doing the final prep, because even though the RWBY is willing to go, those who know better are like, you go, you may not come back.
And some of the more flippant responses may be we were always prepared for that, but people are still going to be concerned.
But this is also where the final cards when it comes to Ozpin are unveiled. Because the first question that can be asked is why is it that Ozpin feels the need to change his appearance? I.e., how old are you? I.e., how old are you really?
Old enough.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, as we established last episode, Ozpin is not about the whole flippant and evasive answers. He is very much about revealing all. Yeah,
and his his unaging nature is, and it would be revealed at this point that it was not something he was born with, but something that he acquired. Because when the bridge had burned between him and Salem, and Salem was exiled, he was when she came back, he was trying to find ways to stop her, but time kept passing on, and he didn't have any solution. And he was getting up there in years. So his in a bit of a gambit, he used one of the relics on himself, specifically the relic of destruction. And since it wasn't quite clear in canon what the relic of destruction did, we had our own take on it. The only thing that we didn't change is that the appearance of the relic is still a sword, just in the same colors as the others. But it is not a sword that is meant to cut flesh. And Zan, I'd like you to be the evangelist as far as what the sword cuts.
All right. So this is going to get a little esoteric, a little bit eclectic, all those fun E-words that mean weird and strange. But to boil down our particular relic of destruction, what our relic of destruction does is destroy causality. And I can already hear the head scratching from a mile away. What the hell is causality, some people ask? Causality is something every one of us follows every day. It is the law of cause and effect. There is a cause, there must be an effect that follows. And for an effect to happen, there must be a cause. In essence, when the sword destroys causality, it can destroy whatever has been requested completely out of reality itself. It removes it from the causal links that it has. And in so doing, the world then has to act to fill that void. Because you can't just remove a cause or an effect without having it somehow resolve itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that those resolve is completely outside of the control of the relic and of the person using it. So when they destroy the causality of a thing, whatever that thing that they've asked to be destroyed is, whatever fills the void is what fills the void. You've got no control over it, and what you get is what you get.
It's much akin to a demolitionist who destroys a building but has no control over what gets put in its place.
Yes. And insofar as that happens, with Ozma, he was like, I just need more time. And the Relic of Destruction is like, okay, and removes the concept of time from him.
This effectively means that he is unaging.
Unaging. It also means he'll likely never go mad from having too much information for living so long, because that would be an effect of entropy, which is part of time.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to think of all the extenuating things that would be cut away by this one thing, it is not inaccurate. It is not inaccurate to refer to Ozma after getting affected by the Relic of Destruction in this fashion as a living god. At least insofar as as being removed from time also means that he technically can't be destroyed. Technically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could break down his body to nothing, but he'd still be conscious.
Ugh.
Yeah, it would suck.
which is also why he, and in doing so, we end up avoiding the trope of the immortal who wants to end.
I mean, he may want to end. You never know, but he can't.
But in his mind, he did that in a bit of desperation, and he has to pay the price.
Indeed.
And the sole reason that he changes his appearance every so often is otherwise people will start to notice
Hmm.
Yeah.
that he isn't getting older. So he will fake his death and start a new life somewhere in some other place with a different name.
On top of all of that, though, he probably when he first started, he was doing it because there were other true mages still around.
Mm-hmm.
And if other true mages notice that you're not aging and you're not dying, that might be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
No, nothing says they can't trap you with their magic and use you as a science experiment. And he was already wary from, well, Salem.
Yeah. That, and I know some might say, well, why didn't other people try and use the sword? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. For one, um, just like all the other relics, they have a spirit who guards it, and in this case, that particular one is not as not as flights of fancy as the Relic of Creation, but it takes a lot to get him to move.
Mm-hmm.
Much like it's going to take a lot to get the executioner to, well, execute. So just asking him nicely to come out isn't going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as why he didn't try and teach others magic, the big reason is it takes several years at minimum to even get somebody to understand the basics of true magic. The limited forms of it the limited forms of magic, such as dust and semblances, those can come more naturally to people, but one, semblances are a person to person thing, and two, it's limited in scope. True magic is far less limited. The fact that it's so expensive to teach just one person true magic is the reason the hunter system was born.
Mm-hmm.
In the early days, it was a means to create support for true mages in fights against Grimm.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is stuff that Ozma ends up revealing. But the other a good amount of the downtime before they head into Vacuo is a bit of a reflection on how everyone's changed since they first came into Beacon. Because I'd say it's been about maybe a year since then.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and this is something I may commission some art for down the road. The outfits that everybody's had up to this point, not exactly the best for a desert. In fact, I'd say the only people who, if you look at their default outfits, who have something that would reasonably work in a desert is maybe Jean, Lai, and Oscar.
Maybe.
And even that's a stretch. But also some enhancements when it comes to their weapons, because they're going to need to be a lot better. They're going to be a lot need to be a lot better equipped because they're going into the belly of the beast.
Mm.
So if this is the kind of point where you can have everybody's equipment enhanced using the tech that's in Atlas. Because if there's anybody who's going to be able to put that amount of an upgrade, it's well the tech and military in Atlas.
Mm.
They are able to fly in via airship, but only onto the borders. Because airships and sandstorms don't mix.
Yeah.
They do have a destination in mind to head. Their mindset is head straight to the capital, sneak in and deal with the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, they assume the maps are accurate, which is a hell of an assumption to make. And of course, there's the fact that they're still going into a damn desert.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen.
Mm-hmm. So, while in the desert, you have them trekking while dealing with grim attacks. It's mostly the RWBY along with Ozpin and Crow. Ironwood and Winter, they have to guard the vault.
Yep.
And the thing is, even though they brought plenty of supplies, those supplies are only going to go so far.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're constantly fighting, that's going to drain your supplies even worse.
Mm-hmm. But just as it seems like they're at their ropes, like they're at the end of their rope, and end up getting attacked by Grim for the umpteenth time, they end up getting saved by some people literally jumping out of the sand to deal with the Grim. As far as who they are, it's hard to say because they keep so much of themselves wrapped up.
Which, makes sense. You're in a desert.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them goes straight to Ruby and starts chastising her for being out in the desert this long and this clearly unprepared.
Which kind of confuses everybody. They felt pretty prepared.
Mm-hmm. They had been oasis hopping for the longest time, but even that has its limits. And apparently they had been tracking the crew for days just from a distance. Mostly because they didn't know if they were with Salem or not. Eventually, it's revealed that that's not the case.
Of course.
Which fighting off Grim, for the most part, might be a major clue.
Mm-hmm.
Might be, but they're overly cautious.
That's
Plus with some of the 4D chess that's gone on, the fighting the Grim could be just a setup.
Mm-hmm.
For all they knew.
Yeah,
Right.
for all they knew, it could be agents of Salem who were pretending to fight with the Grim, and then when they came up, would both turn on them and kill them all.
Mm-hmm.
4D chess at its finest.
Yeah. It's not the first time that kind of thing has happened.
right.
But once it's settled that that's not the case, they ultimately decide you should come with us. we will help. If you're heading to the capital, we will help out, but no funny
Come,
business.
come with us if you want to live.
And at first you have the crew being a bit incredulous because we're just gonna walk into your base through all the desert. How's that any different than what we were doing? And that's when it's revealed that they don't usually walk through the desert. Only idiots would do that.
Where they're going, they don't need roads.
No, at least not on the surface, because because the leader of this group, who refers to himself as Ali, he reveals that there are hidden entrances to a vast tunnel network all over Vacuo. And if you know what you're doing with those tunnels, you can get to just about anywhere.
And you can do it in half the time than the surface because you're not trekking through sand.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, everybody, we hate sand. Coarse and it's rough and it gets everywhere.
Yeah. But the interesting thing when they go into the tunnels is the tunnels are lined with blue crystals, i.e. i.e. ice crystals that are concentrated dust.
Weiss is the first one to notice this,
Mm-hmm.
being, the heir to a dust magnate.
Yeah. Because they fulfill a double duty of, one, acting as lanterns, and two, keeping this underground area relatively cool.
Keeping it cooler than the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not very far down in the sand, so you'd still have burning sand issues. If it were, meters underground, then it would be cool all on its own, as anybody else who has ever had a root cellar can attest to.
Yep. But within the at one point somebody I'd imagine one member of the crew would remark about how much work it must have taken to dig all these tunnels, and that's where you have the revelation they didn't. These tunnels have been around for centuries.
Someone else built those tunnels, or maybe they were just reclaimed from the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
After all, if we wanted to go that far, again, sandworms.
Yeah. But the point is that eventually, through the travel in the underground tunnels, they end up coming across what seems to be a decent sized underground city built around repurposing the ruins of a place of this particular place.
Yep.
It is effectively a resistance camp that houses a whole lot of civilian elements as well.
Think Yavin 4.
Mm-hmm.
Except desert. Instead of a forest, you're underground in a desert.
Mm-hmm. And eventually they do end up meeting the leader.
Although that's not for a while.
Yeah, but before that, one thing that they notice is that there are some people who still have what look like Hunter Academy uniforms going about.
Mm-hmm.
It's revealed that this resistance pocket that Salem some time ago had taken over Vacuo and acted as its benevolent ruler, even if it's a ruler who barely makes appearances. She tried, but shortly after she came to power, she tried to have the Vacuo Hunter Academy wiped out. a lot of people did perish, but there were still a large amount of survivors that were able to get out and get underground.
Hmm.
But but it was still too small in number for any sort of resistance force. So they decided to approach the various nomadic tribes that are still within Vacuo. Essentially they adopted the old ways in order to survive.
Hmm. And while they haven't yet met the leader of this resistance group, they do start hearing the particular uh, rumors of at least a name, Scheherazade.
Mm-hmm. But one of the first conflicts that we actually know what I'm holding that off for the time being. Um, but these but they've been so focused on doing this whole resistance thing that they haven't paid much attention to what's happened outside of Vacuo. And there is a tense bit of trust early on. You know, the mindset of, okay, you're not with Salem, but we still don't know what you're doing here. So there'll be a bit of trust, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, throughout this, I'd imagine Crow is making eyes with some of the ladies that he sees in this city, because it's still Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's someone who might take his balls because of it.
Maybe, but the B plot of the matter focused on on team, as we call them, Team Cunt. They get to see the capital, and you would think it would be this massive blackened hellscape like the Land of Darkness you see in canon. No, it is normal,
Surprisingly so.
almost too normal.
It is surprisingly normal.
And it's revealed that Salem ends up revealing in conversation with Team Cunt that she saved them from a bad sandstorm a long time ago, and a sandstorm slash grim outbreak, and because of that has been seen as the city's savior.
Which eventually led to also being the city's ruler.
Mm-hmm. A ruler who can make a big crowd gather just from a appearance, because she rarely makes one. Which Cinder is impressed with with the amount of control that she has over the city. Torchwick and Neo a little weirded out.
Yeah, they're like, should we, you know,
Are we the baddies?
Of course, Torchwick's whole thing is, yeah, this is all nice and good. This is all nice and good. But we're still getting paid, right? Which is my way of putting planting a bit of a seed, or in the business we call this foreshadowing.
Yep, shading, foreshadowing, signposting. There are multiple names.
Mm-hmm. But the reason why Team Cunt is this close is because they are acting as bodyguards. And I know some people might say, "Didn't you have Team Witch for that?" Team Witch was a bad idea, and we're not using it.
Ding dong, the witch is dead.
We only had one. We only had one character from that we used, and that was Tyrion.
And he died.
Yeah, he's in pieces back in Atlas.
You have Winter and Ironwood to thank for that.
Yeah, he fell down a flight of punches. But
the stairway to punch drunk heaven.
But Team Cunt is being used as bodyguards in the interim, as well as acting as a public face for Salem. But in reality, they're more of a alarm system, just in case Team RWBY shows up, because whenever they're around, they always show up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Red Alert.
Uh-huh.
Yep. But that once again, Volume 10 is meant to be the setup for the way things are going to go forward. That's been the pattern we've used for the last 3 episodes of this series, and I think it's best to keep that.
Of course. We've reset the game board once again and set up the pieces.
Mm-hmm. So then we move into Volume 11. And one of the first things to do, while they want, obviously the RWBY wants to get help getting into the capital, but that requires getting the trust of this resistance group, who refers to themselves as the Dust Devils. But in order to do that, that requires doing things their way. In our notes and for this, we liken it to Ed and Al during their time in Briggs. You have a different way. They do things differently, and it's all about earning your keep.
Yep.
And I could see someone like Yang or even Lai Ren saying, why don't they just go in through the tunnels themselves? It's not that simple. There are false doors and hidden doors all over the tunnels. If you try and go in there without a navigator, you're gonna end up getting lost and starving to death, or getting caught in a false door.
Fun stuff. Traps and trickery abound. It's like any other tomb. Wait, this isn't a tomb. There are living people here.
Yeah.
It's not to me yet.
Well, it's the sole reason why whenever Salem tries to send people into one, when they find an entrance to these networks, it doesn't last long because they get lost. Or they think that it's a bunch of dead ends because they don't know the way through the doors.
She also stopped sending Grimm since Grimm are, mindless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even sending
a spirit maze.
Yeah, sending soldiers in there would cause way too much suspicion for the savior of the city.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned before, the city is somewhat self-sufficient. The buildings that are being used were already built. They're just being reused by this combination of the survivors of Vacuo Academy and the nomadic tribes. So you quite literally have a cultural melting pot that for Blake at the very least, would remind her of Menagerie.
Especially since here they also don't see a difference between the faunus and the humans.
Mm-hmm. Because
everybody is judged by merit.
Yeah. Pragmatism is even more valued in Vacuo than in the other places. Well, in this particular mixed culture.
You have to be extremely pragmatic to run a resistance and avoid a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
Have to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah. And of course, having to deal with a bigger threat is part of the reason you're going to have some degree of infighting, but not enough. And as far as the infighting thing, well, there's a means that's taken care of. We'll get to in a minute. But RWBY is a kid in a candy store when it comes to this place.
Mm-hmm.
To the point of, and this is the perfect spot to do the gag of somebody yanking her by the hood to get her to calm down.
I believe we have it written that it's Ali.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't just go off on your own, kid.
And as far and even though Ali's team is a bit more trusting, others aren't. Including one other dust devil who leads his own squad named Sinbad. Sinbad in this is a asshole.
I mean, Sinbad being an asshole isn't anything new.
No, but he tends to. This is also where you have a differentiation between Ali's squad and Sinbad's squad, which Sinbad rubs it in that in his mind he's taking the fight to the grim and fighting against Salem's forces, whereas Ali is just a glorified scout in Sinbad's eyes.
Not realizing that reconnaissance is necessary to a good army.
Mm-hmm. But of course he sees things in that simple manner of forward combat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Ali sees the bigger picture. And seeing that Ali has brought in what Sinbad refers to as strays, that's another reason for him to rub it in Ali's face, who he doesn't like anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But just before things get tense enough to the point where weapons get drawn, Ali intervenes and reminds him of one of the rules. Settle it in the arena. And since I've been doing a bit of talking, Zan, would you mind being the evangelist what I mean when it comes to settle it in the arena?
Of course, of course. So, the way this works is the arena is a place where all disputes are settled via one-on-one duels. There is a set of criteria, your stake within the duel, essentially, that are absolute. And there are also ways of setting an absolute term of win and loss. And the big thing here is, since this place is a meritocracy, it's all about your individual strength. You could ostensibly ask someone to champion someone else in the event that they aren't able to take up the duel, but it would be frowned upon.
Yeah, it's usually reserved for when you have somebody who physically can't fight.
Mm-hmm. Someone who's insulted or whatever, but they're also infirm.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time that they would accept it. Now, the biggest thing about this is that Ruby's already picked up on the particular nuance here. She's picked up on the atmosphere, that this is something that a person, if they're challenged, does on their own by themselves. Yang is, of course, steaming and chomping at the bit because, of course, well, Yang, while having mostly gotten over being a helicopter sibling, still feels protective. And the terms between Ruby and Sinbad are agreed upon with Ali as witness. And because there was someone to witness it, a set of signal bells are being rung all over the city to indicate that there's going to be a duel. And then once people are filtering into this arena, Sinbad and Ruby are, of course, in the center of the arena, ready to fight. And Sinbad's weapon...
Before you get to that, I should note as far as the arena, think of a gladiator arena, just smaller and underground.
Yeah, it's a coliseum, just tinier. Now, Sinbad, we've already determined he's fairly simple in the ways he thinks and acts. And this extends to his weapon. His weapon is a big, oversized, smashy-bashy weapon in the style of maybe a gun lance or charge blade. Big shield, big sword, or big shield, big stick.
I'd say I'd honestly say given the fact that he does a whole lot of raids, it's more akin to a gun lance than a charge blade.
And this kind of again shows off his mentality. He's outwardly exhibiting what he thinks are his greatest virtues. And so when the fight starts, Sinbad is also trying to needle Ruby, I guess is the best way to put it. Trying to make her make a misstep. Making, insults and slanderous statements, etc. But she's not feeding into it at all. Just kind of dodging everything that he does. This battle is the best way to show Ruby's strength and her growth. She's not having any trouble with this guy at all. When a year ago when she first started at Beacon, this would have given her a lot of trouble. Sinbad's semblance amplifies his own strength, and he uses it in the middle of the battle, but Ruby hasn't even drawn her weapon. He's still swinging at her, trying to get her, and she's just weaving in order to make him tired. Smart way to fight somebody who goes head on and doesn't think of anything. He eventually tries to hang back and start shooting with the gun portion of his giant weapon. But now Ruby's putting on the pressure. She's chasing after him. She's making sure that he doesn't have any time to breathe. At this point, her semblance has become like blink teleports. If anybody's familiar with blinking teleports, anybody who's watched any anime probably is.
Yeah. In canon, they did that whole thing of molecular reconstruction. We decided not to do that because that is way too convoluted for what it is trying to do, and trying to incorporate midway through as if it was always there.
It's slightly dumb.
Yeah.
But as she's pushing him, causing him to become more and more distraught and not quite panicked because he is a trained combatant, she blinks again, but he doesn't know where she is until he turns around and she's right there in his face, and then basically punches him into the opposite wall. And as she's declared the winner of the duel, we see an unknown figure telling someone else to bring her to me, and because she won, she is treated as part of Ali's scout cell.
Mm-hmm.
While this is good for their status in the city, this also means that they have to help him on his raids.
Mm-hmm.
And as everything from this victory high starts to simmer,
And it should be noted that because the terms that were agreed to is if Ruby wins, then she becomes part of the Dust Devils under Ali along with her friends. If Sinbad won, they would be escorted out of the city and thrown back onto the desert.
yeah.
And with Sinbad's loss, that those terms have to be followed. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, and not following those terms would be a massive mark of dishonor.
Yeah. As mentioned earlier, it's concrete in absolute terms. The absolute part is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, as victory starts simmering, as the victory high starts simmering down, someone sent by their leader Scheherazade says that their mistress has requested the presence of RWBY. RWBY kind of wonders what the hell's going on. Ali says to them, "No, this is not a question. This is not a request. There's no negotiation. You're going."
When Mistress Scheherazade does not ask.
Yes. There is no negotiation. You are going.
Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't take long before they arrive at Sheherazade's chambers. And I'd say within those chambers it's arranged in the same way I won't say like the throne of a sultan, but it's very clear that Scheherazade is the one who runs this place.
Indeed.
Complete with having her own elite guard, with a few people in the place at all times and a few people standing outside the entrance.
You know, the normal, this is a very important person that can't die sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But when they finally meet, I'd say that of course Scheherazade notices the silver eyes but doesn't say anything. But I think we agreed that Ozma ends. I keep saying Ozma and Ozpin interchangeably, but you all know who I mean.
Oz.
Yeah, Oz ends up blurting something out, and I'm trying to remember who we had as the Yeggs who cover his mouth before he says something that could get them in trouble.
Crow.
Yeah. Fortunately, he can get away with that because even though it's still Oz, by this point in as we made clear by this point in the story, he still has the appearance of Oscar, which means he's still shorter.
He's still shorter, and really, Crow's the only one who would be brash enough to go, "Dude, shut up."
Pretty much.
He's known Oz long enough to know that Oz won't hold it against him too much.
Yeah. He might take away his flask for a few days, but that's the worst of it.
And besides, you know, Crow has more flasks. You'll
Yes.
never know where all his flasks are, Oz. You'll never know.
Yeah, you take away from him, then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out another flask, like he's got a bag of holding of them.
Only when Oz is not looking, though.
Yeah. But after that little bit of blurt, Scheherazade commands commands the guard to remove themselves from her chambers for the time. One of them objects, but once again, Sherazade does not ask.
Yep, there's no negotiations here.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to leave now.
And it is after they leave, I'd say she does compliment Crow on the fact that he was smart enough to not to stop Oz from saying what he was going to.
Especially considering that it's at this point that everybody realized Sherazade is not all he's cracked up to be.
Well, yeah. The Sherazade it's where here it's revealed that the Sherazade in front of them isn't the Sherazade of all the stories that they heard around the city. And in fact, Sherazade is a title. This time held by a man who Oz knows because he saw that same man as a kid.
Back when Vacuo was just Vacuo and not, Salem's Playground.
Mm-hmm. But because of the fact that Sherazade is this legend who's prophesized to unite the tribes, it was seen that the main way to get everybody on the same page was for the idea of Sherazade's return, and he chose to play that role.
He's cross-dressing as part of his way of infiltrating as well.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't outright say it, but there's the implication that there have been multiple Sherazades over the centuries who would show up, unite the tribes under a certain banner, and then disappear.
The implication being that Sherazade is an identity of convenience to continue to unite Vacuo whenever unity is required.
Mm-hmm. And as far as who this person's real name is, that is not revealed. As far as anyone's concerned, she is Sherazade. And the reason for the harsh absolutism in the place is a matter of necessity.
Keeps everybody focused.
Mm-hmm.
And makes it so that dissent cannot spread.
Yeah. But it is revealed that they can help get them into the Sherazade can help them get into the city, because obviously there's the revelation of what the crew is doing here. But they still have to honor their agreement if they want any kind of help.
Mm-hmm.
But Sherazade does give credit to RWBY for figuring out the way things work here so quickly. Since once again, in contrast to Weiss, who is book smart, RWBY is street smart.
Yep. And because she's street smart, she figures things out pretty easily in such a rules of culture area.
Yeah, and that's not to say that she's a socialite. It's just she's able to put things together out of instinct more easily than others.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned before, a lot of the people here, a lot of the people who form the Dust Devils and the associated civilians are a combination of the Vacuo survivors and whether they be students who are at Vacuo or hunters who had graduated from Vacuo, and the nomadic tribes that are all over the desert. But one of the things to note is that because that adoption of the old ways also applies to how they approach certain edges. There's a bit more mysticism within Vacuo than there would be in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And while Atlas may have a technological edge, Vacuo has a mystical edge. Their students are very, very good at understanding aura and semblance, and which makes Jean and Yang particularly interesting to them, especially with the whole idea of semblance evolution, which is not common in other places, but is a common enough practice in Vacuo to the point where there's some degree of understanding of it. But what they're more interested in is how it went so drastic.
Yeah, it's usually a more subtle evolution.
Mm-hmm. Instead of, I'd say in this regard, the bigger interest would be Yang, who went from energy when angry to light manipulation.
And powered by light.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that they end up learning during the recon and raid jobs that they go on with Ali is that there's a degree of ritualism before and after battles, including ways to bless one's weapons. Which Ozpin remarks that that's not going to do a whole lot, but gets shot down very quickly, because in doing this kind of thing, it's giving people faith,
hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There wasn't a whole lot of hope after Salem took over for a lot of them, and adopting these ways is a means to address that.
Got to give themselves a way to hope somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And this also applies to Ali, who is kind of our surrogate for a lot of the stuff in Vacuo. His parents were hunters and were taken out by Salem's assassins. Originally, he was going to go out for revenge before he met Sherazade. And the realization that trying to take Salem on by himself would be suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Not a smart idea.
Mm-hmm. But she instead talks him into applying his talents in a different way, which goes into both his equipment and his semblance. His semblance is I believe we decided to go with the name Mirage.
Possibly.
Yeah. Since it is a stealth-based approach, not too far removed from the presence masking that Lai Ren has. For him, it's more the fact that when he utilizes it, his body appears smoky and blurred, and he's able to move without making noise. He's not completely invisible, but he is going to be harder to see, because the whole point of camouflage is breaking a silhouette.
Yeah.
One might say he's always one jump ahead. Sorry.
No, you're not.
That didn't even make sense in context.
I'm sorry. It was an intrusive thought.
Clearly.
Mhm.
I guess at this point we have to say goodbye to Prince Ali.
Huh.
But God damn it! But after a fair few raids, which can be solved in a kind of montage manner, and trying to think, did we, as far as his weapon, did we give him katars or something else? Can't remember if it was katars or a Kopesh.
I don't think we gave him anything.
Or
I
we
don't think
we hadn't nailed it down, but I do think katars with some sort of silenced pistol would be appropriate for him because he's all about stealth.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say silenced, I should say suppressed.
I mean, this is a magic world. Silencers may actually silence guns.
Oh.
Yes, for all of you amosexuals out there, it sounds like it's haram, but again, it's magic. I ain't gotta explain shit.
Even though we have explained a bit about magic in this setting.
I can imagine that you could use something like ice dust to freeze the sound wave.
Probably, and there's clearly no shortage of ice dust, if the crystals are any indication.
I can think of about 5 or 6 different ways that a magical suppressor in the world of Remnant could completely halt sound.
Yeah.
Hell, air dust could just stop the air from moving.
Yeah. The point is that he has a katar that has some elements of I'd say a 9mm pistol.
Mm.
And that's the main weapon that he uses, but he doesn't use his weapon until he feels he has an advantage.
That's a good scout.
Because in his mind, for one, he's not Sinbad. He's not going to go in charging guns blazing. He's going to fight like he doesn't want to die.
Because he doesn't.
Because he doesn't want to die.
Also he has no problem with fighting dirty.
I mean, if it's fighting dirty that keeps you alive, who's smarter? The guy who fights dirty and lives to fight another day, or the guy who fights like a dumbass?
Mm-hmm. And dies like a dumbass.
Now, to everyone out there, this is not the Monastery advocating that you should fight dirty, but just remember, eye gouges are effective.
Mm-hmm.
And well, in his particular case, I'd say if I was choreographing a fight scene, I would say that in addition to that katar that he has, he keeps a whole lot of quick developing traps, or just utilizes his own form of impact grenades that aren't meant to do damage, but are meant to either disorient or fuck around with blasts of sand.
You know,
Does Vacuo just have a hard-on for traps?
phrasing.
I knew what I said.
Astolfo would appreciate it too.
But it would still fit with how he'd probably approach a fight.
I think in this case that well, honestly, the types of grenades you expressed, Monk,
Mm-hmm.
light dust and wind dust, all of a sudden you have flashbangs.
Yeah.
and the wind dust could still kick up sand, so now you have a flashbang with a sand screen.
Mm-hmm.
Are we inventing new ways for dust to be used? Yes. Is that a bad thing? Hell
No.
no.
No. And of course, you can have a few gags in this particular segment involving picking false doors or traps, or something to the extent of somebody trying the direct method and it not working.
Mm.
Like say Yang trying to bust a door down open and it ends up backfiring. Quite literally.
Yang is still a bit impulsive, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
She may have grown, but, they are teenagers.
Mm-hmm. But after a fair bit of time, the team is able to get a set of fake IDs to get into Vacuo, since obviously when you're dealing with reconnaissance, having agents on the inside is essential.
Mm-hmm.
And through this they have a means to get in. This is where we shift over into the B plot with Team Cunt, because they keep getting reports about so many of convoys and transportations and the like, as well as certain Grims mysteriously exploding.
Everybody knows there's no such thing as a mysterious explosion.
Mm-hmm.
It's called spontaneous grim combustion.
But say they have a convoy that's bringing stuff in from the desert. Nobody's dead, but everything in the trucks is gone.
Yep.
And when they try and follow tracks, they lead to dead ends. And their solution is to try and comb the desert. Insert your Spaceballs joke here.
I mean, that's the link we have in the document as well, Monk.
But meanwhile, at the same time, Neo has been scouting things off on the rooftops and sees a woman in red going through the gates, and texts Torchwick, "Guess who I found?" and sending a photo of it.
If you don't think that their phones can be smartphones, well, they can be.
I don't see these scrolls end up acting like smartphones as it is, so why not?
Magical smartphone.
But the two of them, there is a bit of panic between the two of them, because if they're able to find RWBY, it's likely that the rest of the team is there too.
And they don't want to see Cinder go fucking apeshit yet again.
It's for that reason that they agree to not tell Cinder about this.
Let's ignore this and say we didn't see shit.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed, says Neo.
Yep.
I also imagine that Neo, to make up for her lack of voice, sends a lot of cutesy emojis on her phone.
Probably. I'd also imagine that, like, if I was directing, I would have her use sign language with subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did say that when we first introduced her.
Mm-hmm.
At least our version of Neo, I should say.
Yeah.
But as one of the directors of this amazing project, I'm making the executive decision that if we ever show her phone screen, it's cutesy. She's got cutesy backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
She's got a cutesy phone case or scroll case, excuse me.
Yeah.
She does cutesy emojis,
Mm-hmm.
which Torchwick is actually fond of. I'm going to say that as well.
I don't think that they would stick around for as long as they have together if they weren't some degree of fond of each other.
Especially since they seem to be this setting's version of Bonnie and Clyde. It's even more so with our takes.
Mm-hmm.
They also seem to be this the bad guy's version of the straight man. Even if Neo is cutesy and kind of plays that cutesy distraction person, her and Tortrick are the people who think that none of this is funny at all. You guys, please stop.
Mm-hmm. That is kind of the leaning that. That's the reason why I talked about planting a seed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, Salem has been spending a lot of time in her personal quarters and barely showing up, which of course all three members of Team Cunt think is a bit odd. In reality, she is prepping a massive spell to summon the relics.
A massive spell to summon the relics and their respective maidens. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody knows this.
No.
For now.
But
Cinder.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Cinder has been wandering the city more and more, seeing how marvelous the city actually is under Salem's control, and wondering how Salem can just squander it and let it all go to waste. She knows that in this case, Salem is a ruler in absentia. And because Salem is a ruler in absentia and so hands off, Cinder's like, I could do better than this.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks Salem has a fuck ton of power and does nothing at all. And because she is so distracted by this conundrum in her head, Neo and Tortrick take this time to go, let's just not bug her anymore. Maybe she'll leave us alone. And they kind of avoid being anything but background noise to her. In inclusion to all this, Cinder is going more and more insane because, of course, the Pyrrha in her head is just like, you're stupid. Making comparisons at, how Cinder can't beat RWBY, will never be able to beat Salem, and can't even beat this tiny piece of Pyrrha in her head.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Pyrrha is still invisible to everyone else because it's all in Cinder's head. And as she screams at this Pyrrha in public places pretty consistently, everybody's wondering, is she just going insane?
Remember, folks, it's the first sign of madness. But that is the outline that we have for Volume 11, which is in our pattern is the beginning to move the pieces phase of the trilogies that we set up with this.
Yep.
And of course, this brings us to the final volume, Volume 12. And not only has the full crew moved in, but they also have a safe house that they're able to utilize.
Yep. Neo and Tortrick not reporting them is a blessing in disguise for them.
Mm-hmm. Because it's important to note that at the end of the day, the two of them are thieves.
They operate on a primary ideal, money.
Mm-hmm.
And if that primary ideal is not fulfilled, well, you're not going to get good work from them anymore.
Yeah.
You're not giving them money.
the only reason they feign any loyalty with Cinder is because of the fact that she has the maiden powers that could wipe them out easily. But they basically, the only reason that they barely have any loyalty to Cinder, and even less to Salem, and it's usually
Salem still hasn't paid them,
and that loyalty begins and ends with they have a advantage over them in terms of strength. But first chance they get, they'd have no problem stabbing both of them in the back, which is considered. But Torchwick's attitude is not yet.
Torchwick's like, we could fuck them over royal, and we should, just at the time that is most opportune to us.
And the sole reason that he would even consider it, as mentioned before, he's not getting paid.
No money. Not good. When you don't pay your thief, that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Thieves can make your lives living hells.
Look, the thief is going to get his money one way or another.
Whether it's willingly or not on your end is up to you.
Mm-hmm. But now, of course, Cinder is just as suspicious of her teammates, quote unquote, as they are of her. She's in the meanwhile, because I do like the concept of Cinder being a chess mistress who tries to plan ahead. It's just that she has eyes bigger than her stomach, and that's still the case here.
She's bad at planning ahead. That's all.
Mm-hmm. But she has been in conversation with a lot of the people within the city to talk them into being on her side. Because she would be she would run the place far more hands-on than Salem does.
Of course, she finds that most people don't care.
Most don't care. Some do, but not as many as one would think. But in the midst of this, Salem reveals the trump card that she has.
Wait, so Cinder's trying to talk a bunch of libertarians into giving her more control.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like it. We never said she was smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just that she tries to be.
Mm-hmm. But Salem's trump card is a small armory of grim weapons. Essentially, the thing that caused her and Ozma to be on bad terms.
Weaponizing Grim.
She's had time to refine the process,
which also implies that her Grim armor that she originally made all the way back then is likely better than it was.
Mm-hmm. Which Cinder finds the whole thing fascinating. Torchwick and Neo are absolutely disgusted.
Yeah. Weaponizing the things that have been murdering your friends and family for years and years, it doesn't go over too well.
That, and for Torchwick, the idea of weaponizing such a massive wild card is playing with fire in his eyes.
You mean he has the same thought process as Ozma? Maybe that's why Torchwick takes a picture and sends it to RWBY.
Well, his mindset is once that revelation happens, he has the attitude of, well, this changes things. We need to accelerate our plans. And
one might say he goes, "Fuck that shit, I'm out."
Fuck that shit, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. And if I'd say with this, he's immediately turning to Neo and going, I'm gonna need you to send a message.
Yep.
if I was framing the scene, Neo wouldn't say anything, but the expression is a case of, I'm not gonna like this, am I?
Yeah, I mean, she'd give him an expression of, "I'm not gonna like this, am I?" And then when we get that beat of him explaining in secret, her sign language has become so eloquent. She only needs one finger to tell him everything.
But it's a but Neo, even if she doesn't like it, she's not an idiot. She knows that
Yeah.
it's either this or we try and go with the plan with just the two of us, and that is a terrible idea.
Yeah. No bueno.
Mm-hmm. So she asks her to go to the city and go into the city in disguise and relay the recording that he took to the RWBY.
Yep.
But it is
And
not
yes.
it is not a direct meeting. She meets with a contact who meets with a contact who relays the info to RWBY.
Yep.
Because since we mentioned the whole thing of scrolls essentially being like magic smartphones, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that they could not only take photos but record the same way you can with a smartphone.
Yes.
So she's able to record. She was able to record. So the recording is essentially the whole conversation when it came to that armory.
Which is, of course, a terrifying prospect to all of RWBY.
Mm-hmm. Like the whole team seeing these weaponized Grim, they are absolutely disgusted. Ozma is fucking pissed. For very good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say in this regard, the person who would end up talking him down is probably Crow. And yes, I know it seems that Crow is acting as Ozma's conscience throughout this arc, but he'd be the one to if there's anybody within Ozma's inner circle, he'd be the one to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it obviously they know it's from Torchwick because his name was on the recording. But as far as whether it's legit, they doubt it. But given that they outright see Salem in the thing, it's kind of hard to dispute it.
Mm-hmm.
But through that, you essentially have the revelation that she is in the. They know where Salem is. They know where. They obviously know what the plan is, and the solution on the matter is to relay the info to the Dust Devils. And for this, Ali asks Team RWBY to go on one last raid, i.e., you do this one raid for us, and our agreements will have been fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a raid on a broadcast station that's overrun with Grim. And the whole purpose of going into this area is once the Grim are cleared out, and we're talking enough Grim that would need a large amount of people to at least drive them out. It's meant to be that kind of final test before the last dungeon, if you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And while it is a tough fight, they do eventually clear it out and are able to send the file that was set up onto on the emergency broadcast system with the comm tower, which is going to go to the next relays and then repeat itself until it's gone through every relay on Remnant.
It's like the clacks for anybody who's read any Terry any Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. The point is, everybody now has seen that signal because it's on the emergency line. This is essentially a better version of the communication message mini arc that was in canon during Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
That was all about having a satellite over us at a certain height to broadcast an emergency message.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, Beacon Academy is still in the place that it was at the end of its fall, but the refugees of Beacon all see it. The only people who had been waiting for an excuse was Atlas.
They're
And
definitely on their way.
yeah, it doesn't take long before a message comes in from. Would you say it would be from Ironwood or from Winter?
It would be from Ironwood.
Yes, basically a message that a fleet is on its way. It will arrive in. I'd say. I want to say less than a week, but it'd probably be about 5 days. Especially and that fleet also has volunteers from some volunteer support from Haven, the refugees of Beacon, and Menagerie.
I could see that.
Since
Mhm.
at this time we already made clear that the remaining members of the White Fang have been reintegrated into the Menagerie militia.
Mm-hmm.
And the other faction that is aware of this is obviously Sherazade.
Well, that's the entire reason they wanted to take that back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when they see the signal go over, yeah, everything's done.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's Gucci.
Salem, of course, does see the fleet approaching. But all that she can do is really just send a shitload of Grim against it, because in any other circumstance she'd use the Dreadnought and wipe them out.
But the Dreadnought's dead.
Mm-hmm. And when it does seem to be on the losing side in this massive battle, she ends up deploying the Grim armor, which there aren't as many of that as the Grim, but it's still enough to put things in a bit of a stalemate in order to stall.
Mm-hmm.
And after some stalling, we have the summoning spell in order to have because fortunately, technically speaking, all of the relics are in one place.
Yep. The two that are with Salem, one that was stolen by Cinder all the way back in Beacon,
Mm-hmm.
and the one that was already in Vacuo. So there's that. Then we have, on the other side of things, the two in possession of Team RWBY, of the Crewbie themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So everything has fallen neatly into place.
Yep. And it's enough for her to start the spell that she had been preparing.
It is a spell because she needs the power of the maidens in order to activate all of the relics and perform her master plan.
Yeah. and we should know, we mentioned this in the past, but it's important to remind everyone that the 4 relics that we have aren't the 4 relics that were utilized in canon. In our case, the 4 relics we have are creation, destruction, order, and chaos. The combination of two of them ended up creating a lot of the things within Remnant. That creation and destruction creating the animal kingdom, creation and order creating mankind, creation and chaos creating the faunus, destruction and chaos creating the grim, order and chaos creating true magic, and destruction and order creating entropy.
Entropy is essentially the thing that the relic of destruction removed from Ozma once again.
Mm-hmm.
The reason he is timeless is because he's no longer affected by, well, entropy.
Yeah.
Which is the only objective measure of time we have.
The relic of creation is still the staff and still the ultimate and still the creative genius. We already talked about the relic of destruction, which is still a sword. The lamp that was seen in canon is the relic of order and allows one to access the Akashic records, essentially.
As we detailed before.
And the relic of chaos, it has the rule of 2 options. It is essentially a magic monkey's paw.
Yes.
And that one has the appearance of the crown.
Yes.
But as things seem to be going in her favor, Salem ends up utilizing the spell, which because of the way the spell works, this also means that Pyrrha's body was summoned into the city. Even if it was still asleep back in the outskirts of Beacon.
Yep, still in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
Pyrrha's body is summoned by itself. Because remember that not all of her maiden powers were taken, only some of them.
Yeah. But once the spell activates, it's seen by everyone, and that's the cue for the RWBY to get to head in.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
not to mention, this also pulls in some unexpected people. Like, all of a sudden, Ironwood is wondering where his adjutant went.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's no longer on the bridge of one of their airships.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bronwyn clan is now headless because all of a sudden Raven is in Vacuo for no reason.
Yep. The purpose of this wasn't to just grab all the relics and maidens, but all 8 components are needed for a spell to summon the gods.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason she wants to call them in is because, due to the experiments on herself completely warping her perspective on things, she wants to wipe the slate clean.
Yep.
But before she can do that, this is when she has everything laid out in front of her. Cinder makes her move, and uses the arm that she used to steal the maiden powers to steal Salem's magic, and through that the power of the maidens.
Yep. And this doesn't work too well for Cinder.
Because remember, eyes bigger than her stomach.
By attempting to steal true magic from Salem, especially when Salem is wearing her grim armor, this kind of fucks up Cinder. She becomes...
Trying to steal the maiden powers also doesn't help.
Yeah. You're mixing, like, several different power sources here. It's no good. And it turns her into this amalgamation chimera of grim features in her, along with all this power. Luckily for Pyrrha, when Cinder goes chimera, her soul is released from Cinder, and so her body gets to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Hooray! But Cinder also has gone full on DID schizophrenic at this point because of all the powers in her head.
Yeah. We in our notes we called this particular Grim a Legion class Grim. Because, my name is Legion, for we are many.
Mm-hmm. Didn't work out too well.
No. And this is meant to be a two-pronged final boss. Externally, Legion is fighting RWBY, and internally, Cinder herself is fighting the other maidens in her own headspace. And since the previous Summer Maiden was not established, we went with the name Jasmine to keep up the motif.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually the interior is able to win out and weaken Cinder to the point where the exterior can win out with the not kill steal but kill confirm.
Kill secured.
Mm-hmm. Goes to Ozpin, who ends up using a combat spell for the first time in God knows how long.
In centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, is it a doozy. I imagine that this is a combat spell. He's like, I need to make sure this all ends right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to make sure that it ends for sure. So Ozpin decides that, there's no kill like overkill. And use the highest combat spell he can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a lot, considering he technically can't forget anything. Again, losing memories is part of entropy, and when you're causally disconnected from entropy, well, you don't forget anything.
If any of you are familiar with the motion wave cannon thing on TV tropes, or its equivalent name, I can't remember the specific, but...
Wave motion gun.
Yeah, wave motion gun.
Because it's literally the name of the spinal weapon on the space battleship Yamato.
But point is a big ass blast to get rid of this Legion after commanding everybody else to get out of the damn way.
Oh man, damn it! I almost hold on. There's a reference I have to make here. Hold.
Are you gonna break the mic again?
No. It's It's the final attack used in the Wonderful 101. Let me see if I can find it.
For a second, I was afraid you were going to break out Volteca.
No. This is a better joke for it. Trust me.
Yeah.
Oh man, I really give me a few people. Just give me a few. Spoiler, distraction.
Hello, I am distraction.
I'll have to give up on the joke.
Yeah.
The joke is though that it's an extremely, extremely, extremely long recitation by Wonder Red, and I'm thinking that this is all Ozma is doing during the battle until he fires it off.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah.
And
if I can't use that example, there's plenty of others. If you want to bring up Dragon Slave from Slayers, you can use that. If you want to bring up Venom from Bastard, you can use that. Although I'd actually say Gamma Ray would work better than Venom. If you want to use Sword of Light from Orphan, well, I'm the only one who would use that example.
Well, you and me.
Mm-hmm. Point is, big damn beam. Probably with a lengthy magic circle, because that's the style.
Yep. So the reason that this is the most ridiculous attack is he says the word, I think, wonderful twice in it. It is it's pretty fucking broken.
Oh yeah, press B to protect Earth.
Yeah, smash B to protect Earth. It literally causes Earth to spin like a marble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just the best. So it's Final, ultimate, legendary, Earth power, supermax, justice, future, miracle, dream, beautiful, galaxy, big bang, little bang, sunrise, starlight, infinite, fabulous, totally final, wonderful, arrow, fire! There you go.
Oh,
Jeez, try saying that 5 times fast. Don't do that.
You know, it sounds even funnier in Japanese, because it's still all spoken in English.
Of course it is.
I love that freaking part of the game. I do.
Mm-hmm.
But that is what I imagine Ozma is doing in the background, just chanting his spell, waiting for his chance.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, ends the Cinder.
Yeah.
We finally snuffed her out. She's nothing but coal.
And
coal or ash?
Yes.
mm-hmm. But in the aftermath of this, the spell was even though Salem was taken out, the spell technically still activated. And it does shortly afterwards complete.
Which means that the gods are still coming in, baby.
And they do appear to the crew. And they had at the very least considered Salem's wish. But because in their mind, the reason they left in the first place was all the infighting with humanity. Well, humanity, the faunus, you get the idea.
Yes.
But the fight against the Chimera made them think that, as tempting as it was to start over, this particular unity was not something they accounted for. So their decision, because it's not like they are bound by the spell. It just summons them, and in her idea is to ask them to do that. But but the gods have their own ideas. They want to see what sort of world this unity will create. And they choose to leave the races as they are. But there is one particular issue. For the whole time, the Summer Maiden was, or at least the powers of the Summer Maiden, were being held by Salem. But because we didn't do that whole thing of last person in the thoughts, and the theft thing doesn't exactly work that way, there is a blank spot in terms of who is going to take Jasmine's place as the Summer Maiden.
Yep.
And they decide that Ruby will take that role.
She will be the Summer Maiden, since it is around her that everyone seemed to gather.
Now, they decide to depart once again, but this time we'll be keeping an eye on Remnant, because again, they are they are interested in what world that Ruby and her friends will create. Uh, and of course, in the aftermath, this is where you can have your fair share of gags in the victory celebration, including one that I know that I'd want to put in of somebody, probably Sinbad, challenging Nora to an eating contest.
And
Because
losing.
we want those. We want the gags. The gags are good.
And because, well, let's face it, with the amount of energy that Nora has, to the point where she siphons energy from Ren, uh, she probably has the biggest appetite out of anybody.
That's true.
And if any of you think that might be off base, I'd like to remind you all of the fact that I have the legend of the two-plate guy when I'm at conventions.
Eh.
Especially conventions where it's at a hotel that has continental breakfast.
Mm.
Something Shades can attest to, because he saw me get a plate full of stuff, including a lot of eggs, because I like eggs. Then after I was finished, I went back and got another plate, and he's like, "You're not going to have room for lunch with that." I was like, "Fuck you, I'm not."
Watch me.
Because I knew I was going to be running all over the place, going from show to show for the entire day.
My answer in those cases is always watch me.
And then after I went through lunch without any problems, when we had some lunch, that was never in doubt again. And I could see some other folks. I could see somebody trying to. I could see some people encouraging the chug chant with Crow.
I mean, does he need any more encouragement than that, though? I mean, he's Doku, or Doku's him, however you want to see it.
No, but you could see him. You could see him care. You could see somebody. You could see him complaining about the liquor, and then all of a sudden you hear a thud, and you see this fucking keg.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was right. Geigar's taller than Unicorn Gundam.
But then we have a bit of an epilogue, and spoiler. I think it was either Zan or Spoiler who suggested how to frame this. I think it was you, Spoiler.
It was Spoiler. It was Spoiler who made this the framing device of Ruby visiting her mother's grave.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because, I mean, that was the first image we ever had of the Red trailer, was her visiting her mom's grave. And then in canon, we visited that idea again at the end of Volume 3? Beginning of Volume 4?
Mm-hmm.
No, beginning of Volume 3.
Yeah.
I forgot. Mm-hmm.
But this is after a time skip. I'd say about a decade. Most of the students, even though they're not students anymore, are I'd say by this point in their 20s.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Probably very, very nearly 30s for a lot of them.
And a lot of a lot of them have gone off and done different things, but Ruby is essentially expositing the whole thing. While if you were to visualize it, you have scenes where this is being demonstrated. So we saved Ruby for last. But first off, with Jean, even Jean has essentially become a teacher in his own right, since enough time has passed to the point where a lot of the damage from everything that's happened has been repaired.
Yep.
Jean, he's obviously everybody still does works as hunters, but he, he's essentially a combat instructor at Beacon, and you could probably have the gag of him having the knock me down challenge, i.e., just standing in a Superman pose and everybody having to try and knock him down. Of course, let's not forget his whole thing is that he has a ridiculously high defense,
especially when he imbues his aura into it.
Mm-hmm. So, much like the first time, you can have somebody do the gag of trying to hit him below the belt, and it feels like they just punched steel. Because one would think the easiest way would be to go for the below the belt, which in most circumstances would work, unless somebody's got protection.
I mean, has anybody ever tried to punch Colossus in the balls when he's metal?
I think it's been done with a few gags in the comics, but it never ends well.
Deadpool did it in the first Deadpool movie and just broke his hand.
Yeah. But I mean, the risk is calculated, but he was bad at math.
I don't think Wade even knows what math is. But in inclusion to all of this, there is the implication that Jean was helping out Pyrrha recover post coma.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a moment.
Okay.
Weiss has moved into being the full-on CEO of the Schnee Dust Company, and this is in concurrent with the fact that Winter is essentially taking the place that Ironwood had. Ironwood more or less retired in the years since.
I mean, after all, he's lost both arms in service to his country. You could say he's been disarmed.
I think at most he would serve as the headmaster for the Atlas Hunter Academy.
Yeah, because he can still show them his metal.
Dear God, that semblance was shit.
Hey, no, our version of metal is way better because it is Colossus, except better.
Yeah, but in the meantime, through what Weiss had been able to learn and the time that's spent, she's been able to revolutionize how dust is utilized with technology, along with starting an engineering exchange program
with all of the other countries.
Mm-hmm. She does have there is still a bit of conflict between Weiss and Winter, but it's more about the fact that it's more about disagreements on how to approach certain technologies, since Weiss's whole goal for the longest time had been to clean up both the Schnee family and subsequently the Schnee Dust Company, with the mindset of using the resources to help make people's lives better. Whereas
Indeed,
Winter still has a military mindset, and the two of them are going to eventually see eye to eye on something. But keyword here is eventually. They are still sisters, and siblings will always butt heads.
Which is why they have so many sparring matches. And at this point, Weiss might be up to snuff with Winter's maiden powers.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you can have a bit of a gag about Crow not being home, because even though I don't do shipping,
That ship sailed.
Yeah.
Crow and Winter are married at this point, and Winter is bitching that Crow's never home.
Mhm.
And Weiss is like you have any room to talk? Because Winter's always spending time in the military development departments and shit.
Yeah. But it's not like Crow is screwing around mostly. He went back to the Bronwyn clan and has been making steps to try and make them go legit.
Yep, he had a duel with Raven. And that's hard work because Raven is a maiden. And that's a lot of extra power she has, but Crow wanted it more. Crow was desperate enough, determined enough, whatever you want to say, to use every dirty trick he knew, which of course falls firmly under the rules of the clan, to tell Raven, I win, now I lead this place, and you're going to do what I say.
Which means that there is a bit of a reversal of things. Crow is now the head of the Bronwyn clan, and Raven is the second in command. A unwilling second in command, but the rules are the rules.
Yep. And of course, they both have what they think is the best interests of the Bronwyn clan at heart. They are twins. They do think about the best interests of everybody. And Raven can see that all of Crow's ideas are making the Bronwyn clan better. Begrudgingly so. Of course, Crow, being Crow, whenever he has to deal with his sister, his trusty flask is never far from his lips.
There is nothing like family that can drive someone to drink. As far as Ren and Nora, that's another ship that sailed long ago.
That's a ship that should have sailed endlessly times ago, apparently.
But they've essentially taken steps to rebuild their old village. A lot of the Beacon refugees have moved in the years since. Now that the place is more or less cleared out and grim attacks aren't as frequent. There are still grim out in the wilderness, but it isn't as bad as it was.
They're back to what they should have been. Equilibrium.
Because even Salem being gone isn't going to get rid of all the grim. They existed long before she did. I liken it to the fact that there are still zombies at the end of in the wilderness at the end of World War Z. The book, not the movie. We don't talk about the movie.
What movie?
Exactly. And while things have gone relatively back to normal with a few changes, like say, a religious renaissance in Russia, there's still certain safety precautions that you have to take in order to make sure that another massive outbreak doesn't happen again.
Yep. And just like in World War Z, we have precautions in Remnant to make sure the Grim don't get too big either.
But Blake, on the other hand, has taken her father's position as the head of Menagerie, and for several years was pushing to set up a Hunters Academy in the place. It's only been in the last couple of years that she's finally been able to do enough politicking to get it made. And once again, if I were framing this, she's overlooking the final steps of construction of Menagerie Academy.
Yep, the newest Hunters Academy to join the Hunters Association. Of course, this academy is staffed by former members of the White Fang that are trusted and loyal and competent. including Sierra. Now, Sierra was going to be the combat instructor. Keyword being was. She thrashed her students a little too much, so Blake was like, fuck it, you're the headmistress.
Mm-hmm.
This does not stop Sierra from bullying students.
It's
Which,
her
of course-
version of tough love. Just more.
Yes, and it's also her version of getting her ass whooped by Blake every so often.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will note Pyrrha when obviously she did end up coming back at the end of volume 12. But the thing is, she had been in a coma for a year, and being asleep for that amount of time can result in a significant amount of atrophy.
Coma patients have to go through physical therapy if they've been in a coma for more than a month usually.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where Jean assists Pyrrha in her physical therapy and in her aura therapy, because she's going to need help with that, having had part of her soul ripped out and then shoved back in her again.
Yeah. Which is a interesting reversal to how their relationship started.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the intent.
Yes. Of course, it is during all of this that Jean nuts up and mans up and tells Pyrrha exactly how he feels.
Mm-hmm.
She's, of course, all too receptive. And so they continue to work together. Pyrrha becomes reinstated as a hunter, and they get married, which drops a bombshell on Jean's family. Just a little bit.
The people who are the worst when it comes to the news as far as the teasing are, of course, his sisters.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the teasing lasts far too long after they're actually married.
What did I say about siblings?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Pyrrha is extremely good-natured about all of this, too. Because when he's getting picked on, she's probably just sitting there giggling.
Yeah. But I would... For whatever reason, I see Pyrrha as more of the housewife in that relationship, even if both of them are hunters.
Yeah.
If only because the reason I say that is because of something that she said in volume 1, where she was annoyed at how her reputation as the strongest student, or the invincible Pyrrha, made so many people think that she was out of their league.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not to mention the fact that even though she is, she's still the maiden for Beacon,
Mm-hmm.
for the vault there. Especially once her soul was returned to her and Cinder was, made into cinders. There isn't as much need to guard the relics in the vaults from Salem, but guarding them nonetheless is still good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So her being a little bit more of a homebody to stay close to the vault makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there also something that we established about, like, her kind of fading from... Was it memory or yeah? So like she wouldn't really have much of a reputation to uphold anyway, publicly at least.
Yeah, and of course, all of the maidens, I'm sure, went through training with Winter in order to keep themselves from fading from the memories of those they trust and care about most. Except for Raven, who can't seem to get Crow to forget about her, but that's also because Crow's been around Oz for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Maiden powers don't work on Crow. Let's just put it that way.
At least the forgetfulness thing.
Yeah. The part that makes them less likely to be targeted.
Mm-hmm.
But Pyrrha is Pyrrha and Jean are happy. That's the best part.
Mm-hmm.
All you shippers out there can be happy to know that.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned before, Beacon is eventually reestablished, with Glinda being the headmistress.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think she was always one step away from, anyways.
Wasn't she co-headmistress?
Yeah, she was
No.
basically like vice headmistress or something,
Mm-hmm.
as well as being a teacher.
Yeah. Now, Yang, with the help of her father, had established a dojo that plays a bit of double duty. Since on one hand it is essentially a I say it's a dojo, but don't think it's like an old school monastery or something like that.
Just think instead. It's like Chop Chop Master Onion, dojo, casino. It's all in the mind. Thank you, Jammer Lammy.
Yeah, but it serves a dual purpose, and Zan, I'd like you to go into what that dual purpose is, since this was your idea.
All right. Well, my idea mixed with a little bit of inspiration from Spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
So Yang's dojo, while being a normal dojo, is also a place for people to come for physical rehabilitation. I'm imagining that even though the dojo was likely very, very nascent, Pyrrha actually went there for some help from Yang.
Mm-hmm.
Because Yang, having trained with her father to get back on her feet before going out to Mistral, understood that there are specific ways you have to treat any injuries people may have in order to get them back into good shape. So she took a great interest in that. And because of that, it also coincides with her understanding of semblances. Now, it's nothing so far as research or experimentation. Those aren't Yang's style. Instead, when people come to her with physical issues or with semblance and aura issues, she helps them to reestablish those muscles and those connections, and to reshape them so that they are physically fit and that their semblances are working properly again.
Mm-hmm.
And this can also mean that she helps people reimagine the way that they move and the way that they use their semblances, like she had to reimagine hers when she lost her arm. Now, of course, prosthetics has obviously gotten even better than when Yang first got her arm back in Atlas. I'm sure she's been getting arm updates from Weiss yearly, because Weiss would just be like, "Oh, I thought of something cool to add to your arm. Here's a new one." And Yang at this point has a Swiss Army arm. Think Bionic Commando, but even worse.
Just without the "your wife is your arm" thing.
Yeah. And without the whole vibrating toothbrush in the arm thing from Astro Lost in Space. But because of this, not only can she offer physical rehabilitation and semblance rehabilitation, and if necessary, reimagining a semblance to better suit your new situation,
Mm-hmm.
She likely has a partnership with Schnee Dust Company and one of their subsidiaries, maybe Schnee Medical or Schnee Prosthetics, to help people finance replacement parts for themselves when they need prosthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So Yang has turned into a holistic physical and semblance, for lack of a better term, guru?
I guess, although I have a hard time seeing her dress as a guru.
No. I'm just using the meaning of the word guru, because she's not a doctor. She's not trained.
No. And as far as Ozma and RWBY, Ozma's obviously still around. He is just as curious about about seeing the new world that's going to be made from the aftermath of the Salem incident. But
Yep.
and by this point he's taken on a new disguise. One who just happened to one who just conveniently bought his way into the Sultanate of Vacuo to help rebuild it.
I mean, Ozma's been around a really long time. It is very clear that Oz has a lot of fucking money hidden all over because, well, when you live
Why wouldn't
forever,
he?
amassing fortunes is not hard.
Yeah.
So now he's going to help Vacuo rebuild, or did help Vacuo rebuild now that we're at a 10-year time gap.
Yeah. But after a whole lot of but as far as RWBY, this is the reason why we saved her for last, because she after everything that had happened, and she ended up having to bug him a lot for this. She was able to convince Ozma to help her to take her on as an apprentice in learning true magic.
And Oz was very reluctant for this, simply because, as we've established, true magic takes time. And for RWBY, this initially started out as a way to get to know the one piece of true magic she does have, the Silver Eyes, to understand it better, to determine its secrets and more of its functions, because the Silver Eyes weren't something Oz invented. There was some other true mage who made silver-eyed warriors, because they had already been around for a while in Oz's time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a chance for RWBY as a silver-eyed warrior to understand her own power and try and unlock its secrets. But after taking her as an apprentice, both Oz and RWBY are actually quite satisfied by the particular arrangement. She's got a sharp mind, so she picks up things quickly. And he's got a lot of knowledge. And her endlessly curious nature, well, that suits her just fine.
Pretty much.
She also uses this time to understand more about her powers as the Summer Maiden. And part of the reason that she had so much time to mess with Ozma and beg him and plead him until he had no other choice is, as the Summer Maiden, she does have to stay relatively near the relic vault to keep it safe. So she's been living in Vacuo.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she doesn't go visit her friends or anything, but she's primarily been living in Vacuo.
Which also lends itself to why she's explaining so much to her mom, and ergo why her mom is acting as the framing device for all of the epilogue. Because if she's living in Vacuo, she can't visit all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it's at this point, at the end of her particular spiel, that, well, Ty shows up, because he knows she's there, because of course he would, since she would have visited them first. And they chit chat back and forth like a father and daughter would, and of course he makes the observation, "You look exactly like your mom did at your age."
Mm-hmm.
And with that, RWBY returns to Vacuo, popping up and saying, "Hey, Ozma, I'm back." And well, Oz is like, "You are my apprentice. You will call me master. Stop."
Pretty much. And again, in doing this, what's established is a new inner circle. the position that was taken at one point by Crow, Ironwood, Winter, and Leo is now being taken up by the RWBY.
I think you meant Glinda instead of Winter.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, but yes,
Hey, I
the
mean,
crew.
similar archetype.
Yes, the RWBY has essentially become Ozma's new inner circle, along with his old inner circle. At least some of them.
Yeah.
They aren't in a direct role anymore because they are also advancing in their lives and taking on their own roles.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since Salem is no longer around. So now they're establishing on securing that peace in their world, the relative peace of what they have now compared to the absolute travesty of Salem attempting to destroy the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with this idea that there is a new inner circle and everybody still sees each other every so often and they're all living their lives as best they can that our tale draws to a close.
Now, is it possible that some other threat may show up in the future? Maybe, but
Likely.
but I don't like putting a definitive closing of the book. I like leaving things open-ended because, for one, I've established in the past, and I maintain I'm a big fan of the work of Riku Sanjo, and he does this a lot in his work.
And just because a story ends does not mean that there are not more stories in that world.
Mm-hmm. Even if those are stories that never get told, the point is that world continues onward.
To quote a song that probably gets overplayed around people like you and me, Monk. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
God, you have no idea. Well, you probably have some idea how overplayed that got in Minnesota.
I have some idea how overplayed that got across the U.S.
Well, Semisonic is from Minnesota. They're from
I know.
The indie scene in Minneapolis, so
I am well aware.
Yeah. But the thing with all of this is that a big problem that we had with the canon story was that even after several seasons, none of the main cast actually develop.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did they not develop, but things didn't really get resolved or let me put it this way. Things didn't really seem to be resolved by the cast, more just resolved around the cast. And even then, the resolutions were very lacking.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing that made this a bit tricky is the fact that, as I mentioned many times, Miles Luna and Carrie Shawcross seem to have this thing of throwing in more characters instead of developing the ones that they have.
Yep. And
that was one of the things that I wanted to address, because it could be easily argued that the setting and story of RWBY is unsalvageable, for a reconstruction, but it hit all of the notes that we look for when we consider what we would do for a reconstruction. A setting with potential, that potential not being realized, the seeds for that potential to be realized being present.
All it takes is a little bit of ingenuity.
Mm-hmm. This one took a lot more grease than others, and this is going to go down as the most ambitious reconstruction that we have done
thus far.
Mm-hmm. And I don't.
Who knows if we do anything more ambitious down the line, Monk?
The possibility is there, but I'd like to at least not do anything that ambitious again for the rest of the year.
Yeah, Maybe
Yeah.
for most of next year.
Hmm. That doesn't mean we won't. That doesn't mean we'll stop doing reconstructions. But setting up an entire secondary channel on my Discord and having a document with all of our notes is not something I have planned. This is the reason why I bring up all the extra characters that they would use, because that's more moving parts that you have to balance.
And we had determined early on that we only needed a few moving parts.
Yeah.
We needed to focus.
And is it possible that we ended up I know it could be argued that we veered way too far away from what RWBY is into our own thing, but one, that's what we do all the time. And two, if we were to stick to as close to the source material as possible, we would have painted ourselves into a corner.
Very early on, in fact.
Mm-hmm. That was the reason why I elected to reboot this project.
Mm-hmm.
But, and of course, wanting to finish the thing is just a testament to my own damn stubbornness.
Mine too. I told Monk I wanted to finish it as well. You can blame us both, people.
Mm-hmm.
As it is, though, there is something I would like to personally say, and that is, we really wouldn't have done this without the other people who have been involved from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we did eventually go our separate ways and disagreed on how this project was to be run, I cannot thank Lady Saber enough for giving us this idea and inspiring this sort of project.
Yes.
She will always remain a friend. We thank you very much dearly for any of the input you had and for sticking in as long as you did before deciding to throw in the towel. Knowing when to retire is just as commendable as knowing when to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And, I hope that maybe you can watch these and have a fantastic time with what we came up with.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, the other good sisters of the temple that joined us a couple times, Mickey Taco and Lady Starlight, thank you, or Miss Starlight, excuse me. I'm thinking of Lady because I'm already in medieval mode, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for joining us when you could. We understand that you couldn't make everything for personal reasons, and that's life. We still appreciate your input and everything you did. And we hope to see you here on the open bar of the internet in the future at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, to you, spoiler, you who stuck it through with us to the end. We love you dearly and we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Love you guys too.
And I would also there's a few YouTubers that I'd like to thank for helping me out with when it came to their videos, allowing me to get up to speed on some of the issues that I wasn't completely aware of at the time. That being Twins Inc. and the Judgmental Critter. Especially some of the videos that Judgmental Critter did, which really helped when it came to getting a better understanding of the character design problems, i.e. the over design thing, which I know I bitch about that a lot when it comes to superheroes, but that's not the only time I bitch about it.
Bitches about it whenever it's relevant.
Mm-hmm. It just happens to be relevant quite often. And of course, a thanks to everybody who has come in and out of the temple to encourage us in one form or another. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for the support of not only the brothers and sisters, but also the people who put up with my crazy ideas throughout this. And I do hope to continue those crazy ideas as we go forward. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.